This is not.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm in tough spot at 4 o'clock after 2 days of event, so bear with us. Hopefully we have a good lineup of experts here to discuss today textile. So as you know, we're 1 year in since the textile strategy has been published. So I'll keep this extremely brief. I'm Valeria Botta from ECO's Environmental Coalition on Standards, and glad that you can still make it. I mean, if you need to shake a little bit in your seat before we start. I'll let Jana give some introductory remark. So Jana Zurkova from Reuse, the confederation of social enterprises that are working in the reuse and the repair sector.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Valeria. I'm Jana from Reuse. Reuse is the European network of social enterprises activists in reuse, repair, and recycling. And I really want to welcome you very warmly as the coordinator of the Textiles Leadership Group of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And also, of course, on behalf of all our members of the group, which is around 20 organizations from across the textile value chain. You will see some of them today in the panel, and you will definitely meet them here in person. As Valeria mentioned, it's been almost a year since the European Textile Strategy has been published. And as the Textiles Group, we have tried throughout the year to animate the discussion about the textile strategy and bring it to life. Maybe you have attended some of our online events, the EU Circular Talks, which have seen actually an immense interest. We had in one of them over 600 people registered. So thanks a lot for being here today and also during the year for listening to us and engaging. And big thanks to all the members of the group for the organization of these events, including today. For today, we have chosen two, which are the beginning and the end of the textile story, we could say, circular design and export of textiles. We know that on one end, we buy more and more textiles, we wear it less and less, and the quality of it is declining. At the other end, we have a big waste textiles problem, and this is going to change also after the mandatory separate collection from 2025. So these two topics are very much related. And today we will hear views from the EU policymakers and from the different stakeholders as to what can be done in terms of making our clothes and textiles better in terms of design, and how do we deal with this problem, which is a very delicate and actually complex problem of exporting textiles and the textiles that we cannot absorb in the EU market. And as a representative of a network that is also dealing with second-hand textiles and often being even challenged for the ways how it's dealt with, I really invite you to look at it from different angles, because the export subject in particular is very complex, and we must not lose sight of what the real issue is, that the way how and how much we consume and produce textiles. So thanks a lot, and I'll give the word back to Valeria.
Jana, thank you so much. We have here Florian. So Florian Marine from the European Economic Forum, Economic and Social Committee. It's workflow for everybody. And he was the rapporteur from the Economic and Social Committee for the opinion on the strategy. So will give us a brief ideas of the main points of that. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I'm coming from the group too. Actually, I'm representing textile workers. So basically, I have around 10 years experience in negotiating collective contracts in the textile industry. So I'm pretty much aware about how the industry is moving. But right now, a few words about Circular Economic Stakeholder Platform, which is a concrete proof built by the European Commission and by the European Economic and Social Committee. A place in which all stakeholders representing a huge variety of interests of our society on circularity, but also sustainability, are in one place. It's a one-stop shop and a bridge between various stakeholders and initiatives linked to the circular economy. First of all, we have to recognize a little bit the urgent need of circularity in the global textile industry. Few figures: around 15 kilograms of textiles are being produced per person in Europe. Discarded clothes and home textiles from consumers being around 85% of the total waste, and collection rates are around 30 and 35%. So basically, the numbers are highly relevant that we need to change a little bit the situation in the textile industry. Now, a few words about our views, which are integrated in our opinion. Eco-design requirement for textile sector must take into the consideration durability, recyclability, repairability, but also usability of the product, together with the chemical use of restrictions, as well as social rights far beyond classical aspects of designing engineering. A careful attention has to be made to the scale of recycling, which I think is important. Critical scale across the value chain is required to provide sufficient feedstock for the necessary fiber-to-fiber recycling technologies and to allow for those recycling technologies to operate at scale. Therefore, the industry must set bold scaling targets and meet them. The entire value chain, including textile collection, sorting, and recycling, requires investment to reach scale. Also, building infrastructure for repairing clothes, such as stores, shops, must represent a key issue for the stakeholders of the industry. Incentives should be also awarded to companies which are climate neutral. Textile waste can be exported, and it is exported in some countries as second-hand product, which is requiring immediate action at the EU level, especially to protect the vulnerable groups. Ways to address waste problem, including the reduction of and overproduction, but also overconsumption, and the extension of product lifetime and designing product for increased circularity should be also taken into account. The obligation for transparency regarding the number of products that large companies discharge and destroy should be approached in a way in which is supporting circularity of the industry. Transparent and common shared data regarding products, recycled and reused compounds, destruction of goods, chemical used in the production process, but also social and labor impact of the production process, alongside with the environmental impact, should be monitored at the supply chain level. The climate commitment must be applied at the supply chain level, as the brands are not the owner of the factories in which the products are being made. In a context of a very fragmented and complex value chain, the pathway towards sustainability and social justice require complementary approaches. Asymmetric power relation and unfair competition practices have paved the way for the exploitation of workers and a production model decoupled from the environmental boundaries. The transition to a new sustainable business model is requiring integrated and effective policies that deal with material and design, production and distribution, market development, use and reuse, collection, but also recycling. Thank you so much for this structured approach. Of course, I'm willing to share my personal view in this field, so I'm waiting for a more open debate. Thanks so much.
Florian, thanks. Touching quite a lot of points when it comes to indeed the social aspects. So good to know that you were discussing different collective bargains in Romania, and it's good to. I mean, we're diving into the environmental aspect, but I'm sure that some of you were there yesterday discussing about the social and the due diligence aspect of the textile industry. All those things need to be held together to move forward. So glad to have you on board. And now the floor to Alice Kuhnke, member of the European Parliament from the Swedish Green. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. To give you, if maybe some of you are tired, I don't know if you've been to many seminars. Yes, you are doing like this. Okay, I can give you some of my energy right now then to boost you up. Right before COVID, I booked an appointment to the dentist. And then, COVID happened and you had to change things. So I forgot about it. And then half a year ago, one of my colleagues put it in my calendar again. This appointment you had. And so now I was supposed to be there 2:00. So I was there 2:00. I put myself in, I can't speak, I put myself in the chair, and she said, yes, you know, this is a big thing. And I was like, it is? I was like, I was in a routine mood. And I smiled, it is? And she said, yes, but we are here together, and if you need a break, just let me know. And I was like, what? And then she started with, you know, got 3 shots of, what's it called, anesthesia? No, what do you call it? So I can't, and then she started to bore, and, you know, and it was like, I almost blacked, I was in shock, and I thought it was a clock on the wall, and I was like, okay, I must go now. And I was in the end, she said, okay, we continue next week. And then I ran to get here. So that's my energy, a shock. And I don't know what she did, because I booked it before COVID, and now I'm here. So I hope you feel that energy. But I'm so...
So the good thing is that nobody else from us had received any.
No, exactly. But I'm so glad that we are here, because I represent the legislators from the European Parliament, and this is, of course, also for me as a Green politician, this is something that is needed to be done. This, and I say this, and you know the whole perspective of it. Long time ago, when I was young, I was the General Secretary for Fair Trade in Sweden. And I know when we introduced fair trade cotton, and how we then spoke with workers from Pakistan and Bangladesh, and with focus both, of course, on the social perspective dimension, but also on the environmental. And I was like, I mean, this was like 2000, 2003. And I was sure that in some years this will be changed. We will have another system in place. And now, today, I'm sitting with you, and I have so much respect for you, and you are all experts from different angles of this change that is needed to be done. And I am one of the legislators working in the European Parliament. I feel that things need to change. And I mean, we can't sit here in another 10 years discussing the same things, having the same facts. I think it's so, I mean, I feel both embarrassed. People I met in 2003, general, I looked them in the eyes, and we were on the cotton fields, and we were like, change is going to happen. Of course, we can't, they only are missing the knowledge. No, honestly, I believe that. It's a lack of knowledge. I said to them, when we get become a big movement, they will know that this is not fair. And then things will change. I believed that. I feel sad when I talk about it, because I believed it. I thought it was lack of knowledge. And now, I mean, it's like 20 years later, and we can't say it's lack of knowledge. I mean, we know what the effects from the business is, both on human life and the environment and this planet. And we know that we only have one. And we know that this industry is so complex and have so many chains, different rings in the chain that are needed to be changed. And we have met them, and we talk with them. And everybody says, I mean, or at least the spokespersons, they say, yes, of course, and we understand, and so on and so forth. And for many years, I believed that it was, they could self-regulate. I believe that too. First, I believed that it was lack of knowledge. Then I believed in self-regulation. No, you're laughing. I believe them. And I met with the heads of H&M and Zara, and they talked about self-regulation. How important that was in a market economy, that you don't force them. Because they have also seen what I have seen. And they have met the person I have met. And they have seen the impacts on the environment. But self-regulation was so important, and I believe them. Now I don't anymore. I don't believe in self-regulation, and I definitely don't believe in lack of knowledge. So these are like the two main things that I can't accept when I'm in meetings. I get so mad, I get mad or tired, or I just walk away. I mean, because we are past that. We are beyond that. So now we need this legislation in place. And then I was so filled with, also with filled with hope when the Commission started to doing this, and we were looking forward to it. And we met, I mean, how long, it was during COVID, we had the first like round table, and we talked about this, and I was like, and all the people working, and it was like, I had such a high expectation. Maybe my big hope, that I'm a hopeful person, is both my best, no, you're laughing. It's both my best value, but it's also my worst, because I believe in people. Because I know that this world is not made from, well, God can have a part of it, I shouldn't say, but it's not, I mean, the world that we have created it, and we can change it. So that's why I think it's so important to believe in people when we meet with them. But I also think that one of the big issues that we also know, all of us know, that we need to discuss, that are not discussed in the Commission's paper or what's now in the table in the different committees in the Parliament, is the capitalistic system that we are in. We never discuss that. So, and that's really, because if we don't start doing that, we will sit here in 10 more years and discuss the same things. We need to discuss it. And I know every time I say this, I get so many trolls after me saying that I'm a communist. I'm not. But I see the big pink elephant in the room, that is that we don't discuss the system and the real system changes that is needed. So I wonder, why don't we do that? Why don't we have invited to these fancy rooms discussing the capitalistic system that are really feeding into that we will never solve this problem? Because we all know that we won't, and let we also talk about it. On what premises do we have the market economy that we have? And is it worth sacrificing the planet? Is it worth sacrificing all these people? The children of the people I met 20 years ago in Bangladesh and Pakistan. I mean, because if it is, then we need to say that also. Can't we say that, at least then, that we think it's worth it? And this is not what my dear colleagues have planned that I should say, but this is what I said. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, and definitely a good point to bring home. And I mean, yesterday was a panel discussion where there was the European Investment Bank that were talking about going beyond the GDP as a growth related topic. So there were some discussion from a youth organization that were asked to Commissioner Sinkovic's. So I feel that those kind of topics are brought in somehow to the discussion more and more. Now we're moving forward with our panel. So we've quite some of them here and some of them online. So making just sure that everything is running smoothly on that front as well. So first and foremost, we have Mauro Scalia, who's the Director of Sustainable Business in Eurotex, which is of course, the European Confederation of Textile, Apparel and Industry. So thanks for being with us today. Then we have Emily McIntosh from the European Environmental Bureau, the Senior Policy Officer for Textile. And of course, DB is the largest network of environmental citizen organization. There's 180, so that's quite a number. We have Lars Fogh-Mortensen from the European Environmental Agency, and he has been working on sustainable production, on plastic, on textile, so is our expert, and indeed bringing in the expertise from the plastic market is also very relevant for this panel. Then we have Julia online from, Policy Director from EURIC, the European Recycling Industry Confederation, that I don't see here, but hopefully someone does. There you go, great. Good to see you, Julia, and good to see these works. And then we have from the Commission, we have Gaël de Rotalier, who is working on waste policy within DG Environment. working in the waste unit. So within the panel, we'll look close, as you remember, Jana said it from the beginning, so more the eco-design phase, and to the very end with a textile expert. We'll look into this, and I'll cut it short because it's a long panel, and I want to have some question and answer at the end. Starting with a very general question to all of you. So what do you think are your priorities or the barriers that you see when you come to, indeed, eco-design and then textile, part of textile waste? Use textile, I would say. So let's start with Mauro and Emily then.
Thank you, Valeria, and good afternoon, everybody. I think I need also a shot from the dentist now. After I heard your speech, I think I would like to also readjust what I plan to share with you. And actually link directly to what you say, Alice. We have passed the debate on self-regulation. We have passed the debate of lack of knowledge. I agree on that. I think we are far advanced. I think we are now more in the discussion on how do we make it, and how do we make it faster and larger scale. And I think this is what we have to concentrate on. How do we actually make it on the ground? How do we deliver a solution? I don't know how many of you were yesterday in the textile session in the other building. There was a SME, a company from Finland, which showed an actual example on how companies of the textile value chain deliver on circular economy, some part of circular economy. They show us how they recycle post-production waste in India, how they collaborate to get finance support from their suppliers, install solar panels, and how they are trying to address post-consumer waste in Finland, so bring back also some part of the production and crack down the technical challenges. They also showed us picture what is making the yarn, making the fabric, finishing, and how important is the water consumption, the chemicals. I think what I pick up from that is that probably none of you heard about that company before, but there are hundreds and thousands of companies like this one, which I started a journey 5 years ago and now delivering. So the real question for us is, building on the experience and expertise of those companies who make these changes, how do we use the legislation that we are now designing together, policymakers with the support of stakeholders, how do we use to accelerate this change? So the change is happening, is still small, so how do we bring it up? And as we like to repeat, we have now 16 pieces of legislation, at least. We're going to have eco-design. We're going to talk, I think, in a few minutes on this one. It's going to deliver higher quality in the market. That's what we hope. It's going to help us to have a digital product passport, which is about data, not only to inform consumers, but also to exchange data across the whole value chain, because without data, we can't do anything. We're going to have 2 pieces of legislation on due diligence, which will impact on SME, whether we like it or not. We're going to have textile waste revision soon, in June. Hopefully, this will help us to harmonize EPR and finance this transition. We're going to have new legislation. We are making new legislation on industrial emission. We need support to buy machinery to reduce the emissions in water and air. But also chemical is going to be tremendously regulated. It is being regulated. We need to use harmful chemicals only when absolutely necessary, in closed loop, though we don't have to impact the environment. Now, closing on my opening points, we have this legislation. It is happening. The question is how we make it real. And one of the things which yesterday was said a lot is to be brutal realistic. It was perhaps the hashtag of the event yesterday. So let me add my 2 cents of contribution on that. To be brutal realistic, we cannot expect SME to comply with 16 different legislation in few years without the right support and without the right considerations. If we like the story, the Finnish company said yesterday, we need to learn and make it bigger at scale. We cannot expect the member state to enforce legislation with the same resource they have now. It doesn't work on chemicals, it's not going to work with more legislation. So we need to have better market surveillance to protect citizens, but also the responsible businesses. And I think, last point, we also need the majority of consumers and the majority of authorities to choose more sustainable product and reward technical textile which are made in a better sustainable ways. Because with the growing niche, we don't go far. So it's something that involves everybody, the companies, the consumer, the policymakers, and I think that's what we need to discuss, how we make this at scale. And I stop here for now.
Thank you, Mauro. Emily? would you like to continue?
Okay, thank you very much for having me here today. I'm Emily from the EB, as Valeria said. So just have 4 very concrete points in terms of our priorities. And the first one really echoes what's already been said by Mauro and Alice about the age of self-regulation really being over. And I think we'll hear more from Lars in a second about waste exports, but I think there's obviously lots of problems, but one of the main problems is that the Global South is really bearing the brunt of the Global North's overconsumption of textile products and specifically garments. So we already heard that we have the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation on the table, and I just want to make some points about our priorities when it comes to circular design. So there's going to be lots of discussions, which we'll all be part of, as to how we actually set those requirements. And I think at this stage, it's really important that we build on the best requirements. So let's look at what's already been done with the eco-label, for example. And I think a good approach is to take it horizontally and not to get too lost into subcategories by different product types and take a wide scope. And there's also a major gap when it comes to chemicals from our perspective when we look at the ESPR. And I think it's really important that we design out hazardous chemicals. And this is also a way to address the manufacturing stages, which is one of the biggest climate impacts in the supply chain. But I think this will be a key challenge to see how the ESPR can do this in practice. And then my third main point is about going beyond sustainable materials. So this is really the concept of emotional durability. So what do we mean when we talk about emotional durability? So this is really the idea that it's not setting eco-design requirements shouldn't just be about the physical durability of a product and fixing a broken product, because there's no point in having a long life for products in landfill. And we need to avoid setting solutions to the problem of overconsumption that involve simply producing more stuff. And for this, we really need to take a holistic approach and understand what drives clothing discard, clothing donation, and demand for new products. And from my perspective, this is price, availability, and marketing, and not always the need to replace a poor quality product. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that we can't solve the problem through circular design alone, through product design. We need to look at, as Alice said, the economic system and the design of the economic system in which those products are sold. So, yeah, we need to really recognise that the problem in many ways is volumes and overproduction. And then my last point really is to look at one way how we could start to do this with strong eco-design requirements, but also in collaboration with extended producer responsibility schemes. So if we use extended producer responsibility schemes, which we know the Commission is working on through the reform of the Waste Framework Directive, we could really use them, if we design them correctly, to incentivise circular design, or what we would rather use the term resource-sufficient design or resource-sufficient business models. And obviously what EPR is a way to provide the funding and an organisational system for typically separate collection, as well as sorting. But let's try and be bold and think about how we could use EPR to be truly transformative. And that could mean setting fees, meaningful incentive to produce less, to detoxify manufacturing, and why not disclose more information through your supply chain on production volumes. Basically using EPR to go beyond paying to pollute. So yeah, that's obviously going to be a big discussion, and we need to look at the reform of the Waste Framework Directive, and it probably will require a broader revision of the Waste Framework Directive than what is on the table. But also looking at EPR in terms of what EPR can do globally. And you may have seen the recent report from the OR Foundation, which describes the global second-hand clothing trade as a de facto waste management strategy and a form of waste colonialism. And I think this is really important for us to keep in mind when we're talking about waste, and ensure that EPR and all the policies that we put in place has environmental justice at the centre. So I'll stop there because I'm probably over my 3 minutes already, but thank you.
Thank you. Yes, maybe you feel that we're rushing through this, but I do really want to have an open floor for a discussion later. Lars, do you want to give us your views?
I do. Thanks a lot, Valeria, and thanks. Alice inspired me a lot, so I also want to tell a bit of a personal story, because the reason why I am who I am and what I do, one of them is that in my first job, 29 years ago, I worked in New York in the UN Secretariat, and I was a group of 5 people organizing COP1. And we believed, we seriously believed that it would take us 5 years to solve that problem. We did. And that experience shows me that nothing happens without serious action. So that's a personal story. Another personal story is that, so I will talk about a briefing and 2 reports that we launched yesterday on textiles, on export of used textiles and on bio-based textiles. And some of you were here yesterday, heard Timmermans mention it, and my director. I put it on LinkedIn, and it went viral. Can you imagine being my age? That is really stressful, seriously. My phone just pops all the time. It's very, very stressful. But there's over 20,000 people who've seen it now, so that's good. So I hope, so just a little recap for those who haven't read that. So we've done, in this report and briefing, I have my colleagues Saskia and Dina here with me today. We've shown that the EU export of used textiles have tripled in 20 years, a lot, to 1.7 million tons, really a lot. Basically what happens is that it's based on, we collect about 38% of our textiles in the EU separately. 10% of that we sell in the country. Another 10% we can send it to other EU countries, and the rest goes to Africa and to Asia. And we don't really know what happens there. Some is being sold on markets, some is landfilled, and some is dumped, and some is re-exported. So those are the plain numbers. But then the question is, what will happen in 2 years from now when the EU, we have to collect all textiles? I think, looking at my numbers, the amounts will probably double. So we have the double amounts to deal with. What are we going to do with it? I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't think anybody has the answer. But maybe the answer lies in the amounts, which comes back to you, Alice. Can we handle these amounts? And the other report we came out with is on the design phase, is on the bio-based textiles. There we show basically there's a big push to move away from synthetic textiles, which is based on oil and gas, so cause a lot of climate emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. But what we want to point is that if you use bio-based textiles, we move away from that, but we cause other pressures, because land use and water use, which is not good either. So again, we point, it's about the amounts, I think. It's about the quality and the amounts. It's not about steering from one fiber to another. I think we have to look at the amounts. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So I hope politicians will take this seriously and do something about it. You're one of them, Alice.
Yeah.
Lars, thank you very much, and of course a very timely report for the event. I know, Julia, are you there? And of course, I mean, Julia, with Yurik, they have also set up and published a report recently on recycling and reuse. Julia, would you like to? Yeah, does it? No, we cannot. No. Okay, Julia, let me go then to Gael, and then we come back to you. Yeah, is that okay? Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much then, and hopefully we'll be hearing from Julia afterwards. Right. I think from our point of view in the Commission, probably the main message is that we are 1 year after indeed the textile strategy, and just to say, we hope back in 10 years' time saying, okay, I believed in it when it was presented and nothing happened. And I think it's probably our job, all of us, to make it happen now. And I think, obviously, from the Commission side, we are hopeful that this will happen. And there are a lot of things which are being established, initiated at the moment, which are there to indeed put in motion what has been announced in the textile strategy. On the eco-design, this has been mentioned already, but this is happening now. Basically, the eco-design for sustainable product regulation is with the co-legislator at the moment. And at the same time, the Commission is already working on which products should be prioritized as part of this exercise, so that indeed there could be some regulation, not just self-regulation, but proper regulation in place to ensure that what is being put on the market is truly sustainable, and notably textile is one of them in the priority list. And there is a consultation happening as we speak now until May from the Commission side to get input from all of you on which type of textile should be prioritized and what should be done about them. So that's happening now on the eco-design. On the extended producer responsibility, that's also something that the Commission is working on as part of the Waste Framework Directive, one of the many initiatives that you're talking about among the 16th regulation. So that's also something that we are working on quite seriously and hopeful that we'll be able to table during this mandate. But where I wanted to stress a bit, where I wanted to insist a bit more, which is a bit more my field of expertise, is on the export. And we're very much, we've been working with Lars and the agency on the report that they're publishing, which in our view is a very interesting also way of putting some lights in an area which so far has not been necessarily looked at as a priority area. What happens to the used textile which leaves Europe? And I think the report for us is a bit of a starting point because it shows, it looks at a lot of data. It also identified a lot of uncertainties. And for us, it's the beginning of trying to find out a bit more about this issue. So, and that's also what the textile strategy is saying. We should increase the transparency and the sustainability of this export of used textile. That's just one piece of the big puzzle that we are designing, but for us it's quite important to get that, and we are really looking forward to work with others. We will be working notably with the UN Environmental Programme on that one to try to get information about what is happening to this used textile, waste, not waste, reuse, not reuse, recycle, not recycle, in the different countries where it is shipped to. And it's not just because we're interested, it's also because another piece of legislation will come in force soon, which is a waste shipment regulation, and that's basically the new rules that the Commission has proposed and which is discussed in the Council and Parliament at the moment, setting out new rules on the export of waste. So if you're exporting waste, and if these regulations come through, which we are hopeful it will, and hopefully it will be adopted by the end of this year, then we'll have new, much stricter rules on export of all types of waste, including textile waste. And the basic principle is that export of waste, even non-hazardous waste, will not be allowed. The country of destination, so it may be Pakistan, Ghana, Kenya, which are the top importers now of textile waste, and that these countries come to the Commission and say, we want to continue importing that waste, and we are showing that we are dealing with it in a sustainable manner. And if they don't do that, then there will be no export allowed any longer. And that's also why for us it's very important to get more information about what is happening to this used textile. We've seen a number of reports. You've mentioned one in Ghana. There was one published recently about Kenya as well, about the import of second-hand clothes. And indeed, if a large share of the used textile ends up in landfills or being burned in these countries, well, this is clearly not sustainable. And then the question is, well, that should not be allowed. And with the waste shipment regulation, we would have the tools to go that step, which today doesn't exist. So that's just a bit explaining everything that is happening at the moment, and we hope indeed it will make a difference. Thank you.
Great to touch on so many different topics on such a short time. Thank you very much, Gael. And of course, I mean, clearly there are so many different pieces of legislation that are coming up because there is no time to waste, and there is knowledge, there is the will to go forward. So very happy that we try to see whether Julia can reach us.
What for me, what I just wanted to highlight, of course, is, and this is what Valeria mentioned at first, that we've also looked into, not into the topic of exports, but actually at the topic of environmental benefits for certain recovery operations, be it reuse or recycling. And one number that I found very, very interesting is that reuse, and here I also include global reuse, has actually 70 times better environmental footprint than producing a new textile. Of course, the end of life phase has to be looked at, that I definitely agree, but this is really, really huge. And what I want to say is, or as a summary in the end, because I know we don't have that much time, is that we really have to make sure that also global reuse is possible, but that we have that proper distinction, that it doesn't mean that we want to ship just random textile waste all over the place, but really only those textiles which can be reused and are reused also in the global south. This is a really, really, really important distinction that has to be made, and without this, I think the system cannot work. But maybe to offer some solutions or some help, some ideas from our side, what we do need is, of course, a very good sorting process in Europe to make sure we have only that what has really undergone a proper sorting with many, many steps, that can be shipped as a reusable textile. And what cannot meet those sorting steps, what has lower quality perhaps, must find treatment within the EU, within Europe. This is really, really important. And then just one more word, what also needs to be done, we do need to scale up reuse in Europe. Last in the EEA report, they're mentioning it, it's not really happening at the moment. So we do need to scale up the European local reuse as well, perhaps by lowering VAT on second-hand goods or something like that. But on the other hand, we also need to scale up recycling within the EU. So I think if we have both of those, more reuse in the EU, more recycling in the EU, the problem of exports of used textiles will also be lower. But, and I really caution this, we should be careful when saying used textiles, because it doesn't always mean the same. It may mean textile waste, or it may mean second-hand textile. And this is really an important distinction that we have to make. I think that's it. And hopefully
Julia, thank you very much. Super clear. So custom codes indeed are a big wordy issue happens. So where we ship things that should not be shipped to begin with, as Timmermans has said yesterday, by the way. Okay, so how do we do this? Because we actually have 10 minutes, so it will be a flashlight of a follow-up question, and let's see how we go forward. So Mauro, you were talking indeed about going a bit more deeper into the eco-design minimum requirements, and I was wondering, from your point of view, you have said something about good quality. What do you feel that encompasses?
Thank you. And I think I have to be shorter the whole time. No worries. No, but I think Julia touched upon very important elements, legal clarity. Sometimes also the definition have a tremendous impact. We have little time to deliver. We have maybe less than 1 year to make our design requirements. We have a very complex value chain, so we need to focus. We believe we need to focus, first of all, in the highest volume. So we need to focus on garments, we believe, when it comes to eco-design, leaving all type of technical textile or other textile product aside for now, at least. Let's start to make a big impact for two reasons. One, because the biggest volumes are with garments, 28 billion in the EU and UK. This is how much we circulate. Let's focus, we suggest, on key parameters such as quality, durability, how much you can wash a garment, what is the color fastness, the shrinkage of the garment. It might be simple or maybe even trivial things for you, but this is very often what you have a bad impression of a product after you wash it and the color is different. Now, if we can already have legally binding higher quality standard for those that an industry can deliver on and can help us get rid of the worst quality products from the market, we have a huge impact. And that's already a good start. Reusability is important, as we talk all the time throughout the day. We are in for usability, which is linked to quality, but also we might find perhaps other also definition of what is the reusability elements. And recycled content is important. And this is a chicken and egg point. We have 7.5 million tons of textile waste to deal with. We don't know what to do with that. And we need to build a new textile recycling value chain. Reuse alone is not sufficient. Any product, even the highest quality one, at some point ceases to function. So we need to recycle, which is decoupling, and it is saving new resources. And that's very challenging because we don't have this, but we need to build them. We don't have a lot of time. Last point, to be very quick and leave also the other colleagues to comment, we need to think about the implementation. How would that work in reality? What is the system to demonstrate that you are compliant with these requirements? Everybody has to be compliant, not just the usual suspects or the companies everybody puts the light on. We need to cut free riders. We need to protect the citizens and the fair businesses. and we need global rules. So I think if we set good requirements, we're gonna be the first continent regulating on quality of garments, because nobody else does it at such an extent, and we can maybe inspire the rest of the world. Because in the EU we are only 450 million, but there are 8 billion of people on Earth, and what goes into Africa doesn't only come from Europe; it's global. So we need to inspire also changes in other value chain.
Mauro, thank you, and I appreciate you being brief. Emily, you touched upon quite a lot on overproduction and indeed the issue of volumes. So I was wondering, can you elaborate a little bit on that, and how do you think that, I don't know, eco-design can address that?
Yes, definitely. So I think what's really positive about the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation is that on one side it's looking at the product requirements and how we actually will design the products, but it also has clear opportunities for looking more broadly at the sort of system within which those products are sold. And to pick up on what Mauro just said about the need to ensure that everyone is compliant, I think this shows the need to ensure that through the ESPR, we also regulate e-commerce platforms, and because from our perspective, I think we really see that it's a lot of e-commerce platforms which are driving the worst forms of hyper overconsumption or ultra fast fashion, or you can choose the term you prefer to describe this form of consumption, and this really boils down to the idea of liability. And when you buy a product online, it's not always clear who is liable for ensuring that product is compliant. So I think there's an opportunity for the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation to build on the limited liability that's been set in other legislation, such as the Digital Services Act, and ensure that the policy that we set now keeps pace with the continuing evolution and shape of e-commerce in fashion. And then my last point, which is linked to e-commerce, to answer the question of how we can also look at overproduction, is one of the impacts of the rise of e-commerce is returned goods, and this is why it's really great that in the ESPR proposal there's the potential to have a ban on the destruction of unsold goods. And I think it'd be really great if this also requires that the ban comes into force as soon as possible and does not have exemptions and loopholes, but that it also requires mandatory reporting of unsold and returned items, and also includes meaningful fines for non-compliance. So I'll maybe stop there for the time.
Thank you. I feel, on all of these points we can go on for a while. So, Lars, clearly you come from plastic. You have seen what happened when China banned the import on plastic. How do you think that you can handle the separate collection of textile that comes out in 2025? So the huge amount of indeed the textile that will be there and that will need to be dealt with. So on one side, are there more countries going to be banning imports of used textile? And then on the other side, how do you think we can handle the collection?
Thanks, Valerie. I think in the long term, we have the solutions, with EPR, with eco-design. Hopefully, all these instruments will help us. In the short term, I have no idea what the countries are going to do. The options are not there. Huh? It's going to be really, really tricky. Huh? But as you said, I work on plastics as well. And we said a few years ago, you remember this, that the textiles is the new plastics. And it is true, because actually what is happening on textiles happened somehow similar on plastics some years ago. And we've seen that, that we don't export a lot of plastics anymore. Now we are negotiating a global treaty on plastics. So hopefully maybe this is a way to go to make this global and to also discuss it politically at the global level. I think that maybe that's something to think about.
Great. Gali, you have mentioned the waste shipment regulation, of course, and Julia was pointing out about the issue with the codes and the fact that all of those are grouped. And of course, from a civil society standpoint, there is a lot of trade data that are out there that, for example, having access to some of those trade data have foster civil society understanding of the, for example, the Uyghur case, because of course, like there is India or the US where some of those trade data are publicly available. So I was wondering from that perspective, is there something on custom code that we can do, and how can we, move forward on that?
Great, a good question on customs code to finish. Well, I think on the specific issue of used textile, I think you've mentioned indeed there are customs codes which do not really make a distinction between what is waste, what is not waste, and that is explained in the report by the by Lars and his colleagues from the agency. This is one element. I think there are other codes in other legislation. In the Basel Convention, you have a code for textile waste. In the waste shipment, in the list of waste, you also have codes for what is waste as a textile. And I think for us, on that specific issue, what is really important and what we hope to work on is to come up with a best possible definition to distinguish between what can be reused and what is a waste. And I don't think it's going to be necessarily easy, but that's really important because that makes a whole difference between what Julia explained about getting global on circular economy. If you export used textile which are reused second-hand, I mean, that's from an environmental perspective, there's not much to be said about it. But if only part of it is really reused, but the rest is landfill, and that's not going to work. And I think for that, it's all about trying to have this criteria in place to distinguish those, but also try to see what can be done in the EU, not only on sorting. This is also what Julie mentioned, to make sure that you have a proper sorting of the textile, the used textile, to ensure that you can make this distinction. And that's also something that we are eager to work on with the EPR and with all the rest about building a proper sorting and recycling industry of textile in the EU.
Perfect. So we, really a couple of minutes. Are there any questions? And I'm very glad I kept a couple of minutes. Okay, let's do 1, 2, and 3.
Hello, I'm Katya Dayan-Vladimirova. I'm a researcher at the University of Geneva, and my job here today is to make sure that you guys have also research perspective and the latest data. And I wanted to draw your attention to 2 things that came out from publicly funded research initiatives. One is data and numbers on how much we should limit the volumes of consumption and production, which were published by the Bahodokul Institute in November last year. And the second piece of information is a proposal for targeted producer responsibility that comes from Oslo by a team of researchers that have profound expertise in sorting waste streams and have been working for a while trying to identify which brands, which clothes ends up in waste streams. I would like to just, if I have to form it as a question, I would like to ask, are you aware of these? And if not, I would be happy to put, the team working on this in touch with the teams that have the expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's group the question and then we go back to this.
Yes, hello. So my name is Dina Lingas, and just a disclaimer, I was part of writing the report from the EA together with Lars and Saskia, so I'm definitely quite biased in this topic. I think it's very interesting when you mentioned the connection between plastics and textiles and how they are kind of following the same route, and there's many similarities that we need to take into account. And I wanted to ask you if you have considered the difference between recyclability and actual recycled. So I think definitely when we look into Europe and we look at those commodity codes, we look at better sorting to understand what are we actually exporting. And with the Eco-Design Directive, we need to know if this is reusable, and I completely agree with that. But there's a huge gap between that and knowing what happens on the ground and whether or not it will be reused, even though it is reusable. And I think that also points to what Julia said regarding this is a global endeavor. It's not necessarily only about building up capacity in Europe, but actually on the ground, because then you can capture both the reuse locally and the recycling afterwards. So I was, again, like Katie, that how do I phrase this as a question, but how do you consider in this very EU-focused conference also the global perspective of making this into a global collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman.
Yes. Thank you, first of all, for allowing a non-European to be at your session and conference. We heard the topic a number of times. You invited the Swedish presidency representative to come and make a statement. How about next year inviting the G7 presidency and the G20 presidency to come and make a statement that they learn, you learn from them too? And the second aspect is, we talk about this, the number of regulations. Do you feel that someday we could imagine that an SME could be looking at a mind map where they say they're trying to invest into wastewater treatment technology? They click on it and they say, when they do this, they can be prepared for the future industrial emissions directive, and as per EU green taxonomy, they have access to green funds. Or when they invest in X, they can help fulfill regulation or directive A, standard P, and get funding as per Q, like an integrated mind map of all the European regulatory framework all together, visualize easily.
It's your idea.
Thank you very much. I mean,
Go with that idea.
the financing of this is, of course, I mean, some of us are also work on the taxonomy. So there is some taxonomy work and sustainable finance for defining criteria for apparel and production, leather. There is quite a few. So, but please take it away. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, it's a very short break and they will need a coffee before the last one.
Totally agree with that. Yes. So very briefly, so thank you for, if you haven't read the Hot and Cool report, do that, because it's a very cool report with a lot of insights. And then I'm glad to receive more information on DEPR, the targeted DEPR one. For Dina's answer, Gael, would you like to take it? And then maybe Alice, if you still have a couple of concluding remarks.
No, I think I could take a bit the discussion on the international dimension, so not necessarily everything that you've asked, but on that one, because that was also a question asked by the gentleman there. And of course, this is not just an EU issue. I think we have been discussing a lot about what is happening in the EU, because there's a lot of things happening, and we are just getting there now with the textile strategy. But definitely, at least within the Commission, we are also bringing the issue of circular economy in the G7, in the G20, in the UN General Assembly, as much as we can in the Basel Convention. So there are these efforts. I think, well, there could be more, should be more, probably, and getting a bit more targeted. But we have to get at the EU level first going, and then we can bring the issue as well at a higher level with our partners. And we're also working at the bilaterally with a number of them, notably the big textile producers, and which also are the importer of used textiles. So yeah, this is not forgotten, sorry. But okay, for this session we had an EU focus. Next time, maybe next year, we'll have one on the international dimension.
Thank you. And definitely, I mean, there is so much that the European can do in this space, setting quite a lot of blue sky thinking and some requirements that will have spillover effect everywhere. So we're trying to get hold on that and make the most of it. Alice, if you still have a couple of minutes to some concluding remarks.
Yes, you will get your coffee. I just want to say I'm very inspired by all of you. So thank you for that. And I think I try to remember everything that have been said and asked. And I think it's important for all of us, no matter from which platform we are waking up and going to work and what we do, to remember and reminding ourselves that everything that now is a possibility, those 16 files and everything, I mean, they will stand by humans and they will fall by the hand of humans. So take yourself seriously. We must take ourselves very seriously, because then this could be happening for real, and we don't need to meet here again in 10 years. Thank you.